All right, we're into chapter 5 today. We're going to get through a few sections, and they are called the teachings of the Christ. It might be useful to make a few opening remarks upon the general subject of the teaching given down the ages by the sons of God who have come forth in the hour of humanity's need, in order to present to the consciousness of the men of their time certain required ideas and concepts of truth. When they come, their aim is to meet the immediate need in such a fashion that the ideas presented may become ideals to which eventually the life of mankind would later conform and bring about a better civilization. There's been a great continuity of such teaching down the ages. There is not the time to write or the time to read a complete analysis or statement as to the progressive revelation of ideas which great and illumined minds, authorized by the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, have brought to humanity. All the cyclic teachers, to differentiate them from the many lesser teachers, have mastered life for themselves in the three worlds of human evolution: physical, emotional, and mental, have achieved control of the physical level of consciousness of their emotional feeling nature, and have attained mental understanding and finally enlightenment. The problem of the hierarchy has been and still is how much exact truth humanity can comprehend, and to what extent absolute truth can be presented to their awakening minds. They have to decide which aspect of universal truth will enable man to emerge out of his difficulties, and thus move forward on the path of return to God. They have to know, therefore, at what point on the ladder of evolution humanity stands at any given period. This in itself presents a field of research to them. The method hitherto followed has been to decide what is the major factor lacking in man's perception of reality at any given time, and what recognized divine truth has in it the seeds of a living activity for humanity in a particular condition, necessitating a certain type of help. They have also to determine how that help can best be presented so that its results will be lasting, cultural, and effective. Hitherto presented concepts have been formulated by the world teachers of the period and presented to a picked and chosen few whose task it has been to take the newly presented idea and promulgate it among those men who are enlightened enough to accept it, to spread it, to live it, and to make it popular. This they have done for ages with more or less success. It is also not possible here to give the relatively few truths which guide the development of humanity in old Atlantis. These, however, form the firm foundation of all later teaching. We can study as a background to our consideration of the teaching which Christ will give after his reappearance several of the minor concepts which today underlie the teaching of all the world religions, and which modern religious teachers should be presenting to the public mind. And a lot of times I want to say, as I read this, that the teaching that we need is not always the teaching that we want at that particular time. We're always expecting something much deeper, but what we need to unfold is not necessarily that same idea that we have, and these things do not come in the way that we anticipate that they would come. The first such teacher is of such ancient date that it is not possible to say when he truly lived. Even his name is a modernized one, given to an ancient hero teacher. His name is Hercules. He presented to the world through the form of a pictorial and world drama, symbolic in nature, the concept of a great objective, only to be reached as the result of struggle and difficulty. He pointed to a goal toward which men must make their way, no matter what the obstacles. These obstacles he portrayed in the 12 labors of Hercules, which were dramas and not factual occurrences. He thus pictured, for those who had eyes to see and hearts to understand, the nature of the problem to be solved upon the path of return to God. He depicted the prodigal son's journey back to the Father's house and the tests and trials which all disciples, aspirants, and initiates have to face, in which all those who today compose the spiritual hierarchy have already faced. When this statement is considered, it must include also the Christ, who we are told was in all points tempted like as we are, but also passed triumphantly the tests and trials. At some also unknown date, Hermes came, so the records say, was the first to proclaim himself as the light of the world. Later, the great teacher, Vyasa, appeared. He gave one simple and needed message that death is not the end. From his time, the thinking of humanity about the possible immortality of the soul can be seen to stem. Vaguely and instinctively, men had hoped and sensed that the discarding of the physical vehicle was not the final consummation to all human struggle, loving, and aspiration. In those early days, feeling dominated and instinct-led. Thought was not found among the masses of men as it is today. In this period of culmination in which we now live, the work of the spiritualistic movement in its many forms is in reality the emergence of that stream of thought energy and of the idea which Vyasa thousands of years ago implanted in the human consciousness. The effort of the intellectuals to prove the scientific possibility of immortality is part also of this great stream carried on to intellectual levels, thus salvaging Vyasa's work from the mists and glamours and the psychic dishonesty with which it is now surrounded. The fact of immortality is today on the verge of scientific proof. The fact of the survival of some factor has already been proved, though what has been demonstrated as surviving is apparently not in itself intrinsically immortal. The factual nature of the soul and the fact of soul survival and of its eternal livingness go hand in hand and have not yet been scientifically proven. They are, however, known and recognized as truths today by such countless millions and by so many intellectuals that, unless mass hysteria and mass deception is posited, their existence is already correctly surmised. And I think we can see this in all of the near-death experience accounts that have been given. A lot of those people have felt the need to tell everyone that it's, the death of the body is not the end. And, but mass deception is in effect, and we still question it for whatever reason. Buddha is the next teacher to whom we should refer, though there were many between his time and that of Vyasa during those centuries wherein history is relatively dim and faint in its outlines. The intelligence of men had been rapidly growing, and the inquiring perception of mankind came into increasing active use. The asking of questions to which there seems no apparent or easy answers focused itself in a group of thinkers in India, and they represented thinking men in every land. They asked the ancient questions as to why there is sorrow and misery in every land and in every life. They asked what caused these things and what must be done to change these circumstances of life. They demanded to know what was the integrating principle in man, and what was the soul, and was there a self? The Buddha came forth to give the answer and to lay the foundation for a more enlightened approach to life, giving the teaching which would open the door to the work of the Christ who would, he knew, follow in his steps. It is interesting to remember that when the Buddha came, approximately 500 years before Christ, the exact date of Christ's birth remains debatable, the first dim influences of the Piscean age could be felt, impinging upon the powerful quality of the age of Aries, the scapegoat or the ram. It was the influence of this age persisting throughout the Jewish dispensation, which led eventually to the distortion of the simple teaching of the Christ when he came. He was erroneously presented to the world as the living scapegoat, bearing away the sins of the people, and thus originating the doctrine of the vicarious at-one-ment. It was St. Paul who was responsible for this emphasis. A paralleling instance of a similar distortion was also of Jewish origin and appeared in the early stages of the cycle of Aries, the ram. We are told that the children of Israel fell down and worshiped the golden calf, the symbol of Taurus, the bull. This was the preceding astronomical cycle. These are astronomical cycles and not a presented astrology. In the early stage of Aries, the teaching reverted to that of Taurus, and in the early stages of Pisces, it reverted to that of Aries, and thus set the seal of retrogression upon the teaching which now controls so many Orthodox Christians. Buddha answered the questions posited in his time by giving out the Four Noble Truths, which satisfactorily and eternally answered man's demand of why. These truths can be summarized as follows. The Buddha taught that misery and suffering were of man's own making, and that the focusing of human desire upon the undesirable, the ephemeral, and the material was the cause of all despair, all hatred and competition, and the reason why man found himself living in the realm of death, the realm of physical living, which is the true death of the spirit. He made a unique contribution to the teaching given by Hercules and Vyasa, and added to the structure of truth which they had erected. Thus he prepared the way for Christ. Between the times of these two great teachers, the Buddha and the Christ, lesser teachers appeared to amplify and add to the already given basic truths. Of these, Sankaracharya was one of the most important, giving, as he did, deep instruction upon the nature of the self. Also, the teacher in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna, must be noted, for many believe him to be a previous incarnation of the Christ. And that was a very interesting statement made earlier in this paragraph, that the reason why man found himself living in the realm of death, the realm of physical living, which is the true death of the spirit. So where are we living is the question. And in our own beingness, as we see here, that the physical plane, physical living, is the true death of the spirit. And that's an occult, truth that is well known, that, this is, this life essentially without the spirit is death. Thus, the fundamental truths upon which relation to God, and therefore relation to our fellow men, is founded are always given out by the sons of God, or the Son of God, who, in any particular world period, is the teaching head of the spiritual hierarchy. In due time, Christ came and gave out to the world, mainly through his disciples, two major truths: the fact of the existence of the human soul, and secondly, the system of service. This phrase is used advisedly as a mode of establishing right human relations to God and to one's fellow men. And we're going to hear those words, right human relations, quite regularly. And it really makes this very simple and is definitely worthy of our contemplation and meditation, much of it, to consider right human relations and how we as humanity need to get there and what it's going to take to get there. He told men that they were all sons of God in the same sense that he was. He told them in many symbolic ways who and what he was, and assured them that they could do even greater things than he had done, because they were divine as he was. These greater things humanity has already accomplished upon the physical plane and in its control of nature, as Christ knew men would. Because he knew the workings of the law of evolution, he taught them that service was the key to the life of liberation, teaching them the technique of service through his own life as he went about doing good, healing the sick, as well as preaching and teaching the things of the kingdom of God and feeding the hungry, both physically and spiritually. He made the life of every day a divine spirit of spiritual livingness, thus emphasizing the teaching of the Buddha through desiring nothing for the separated self. Thus the Christ taught, loved, and lived, carrying forward the great continuity of revelation and of hierarchical teaching. Then he entered for us within the veil, leaving us an example that we should follow his steps. Follow him in his belief in divinity, in his service, and in ability to penetrate into that area of consciousness and that field of activity, which we call the true Church of Christ, the spiritual, at present invisible hierarchy of our planet, the true kingdom of God. The veil that hides the real church from us is now in process of disappearing, and Christ is on the verge of reappearing. And in this, when we look at the church on the physical plane, the Christian church, are those there, all practicing selflessness and right human relations with everyone when they walk out of those doors? This is a very simple perspective switch from the vicarious at one man to this is what needs to be spread, and it's not necessarily the gospel, it's right human relations and treating other, our brothers and sisters properly, as we would want to be treated and as we know Christ would treat us, and then embodying that and passing it along. But we're very much stuck in selfishness right now, it seems. In the light of the past, therefore, in the light of the past, therefore, and of humanity's present need, which Christ and the hierarchy must meet, what will be the teaching which he will this time give? Such is the question which his disciples are now asking. The probability is that his teaching will fall into 4 parts. We would do well to consider each of them and do our best to understand and prepare the human mind for the reception of what he has to give. And in this first section of the teachings, it is called the establishing of right human relations. This is going to be a major part of what can change the world, and it's very simple and common sense. The phrase right human relations is one that is today being much discussed. It is being increasingly realized that it is a major human need, and with that, let's just say a major human need. It is a human need to be treated properly with love and compassion and kindness and all of these things. We need this, otherwise we're doomed, right? and the only hope of a peaceful and secure future, right? So right human relations is a major human need and the only hope of a peaceful and secure future. Wrong human relations have reached such a stage of difficulty that every phase of human life is in a state of chaotic turmoil. Every aspect of daily living is involved: family life, communal life, business relations, religious and political contacts, governmental action, and the habitual life of all peoples, including the entire field of international relations. So we can see that this is affecting all of us in every department. Everywhere there is hate, competition, and maladjustment, strife between parties, the vilest kind of muckraking, and scandal making, deep distrust between men and nations, between capital and labor, and among the many sects, churches, and religions. The difference between a sect and a church is, after all, only one of degree and historical inception. It is one of interpretation, of fanatical adherence to some pet truth, and always exclusiveness, which is contrary to Christian teaching. So there's another example. Exclusiveness is a good word there. Nowhere is there peace today and understanding. Only a small minority in relation to the Earth's population are struggling for those conditions which will lead to peaceful and happy relationships. The strength of this fighting minority struggling for peace and right relations consists in the fact that the work they are attempting to do is in line with divine intention and purpose. Into this chaos of conflicting competitive and fighting interests, Christ plans to reappear. I would ask you to contemplate the very real horror of what he has to face, and the necessity for some measure of order to be brought about in the world, for certain basic principles to be enunciated and partially at least accepted before he can usefully work amongst men. If he were to come immediately, his voice would not be heard, for the noise of men's quarreling is too great. If he sought to attract human attention, even through the prophesied sound of the trumpet, he would be classed simply as one who advertised himself. If he preached and taught, he would attract primarily those who think naturally in unison with his message, or the gullible and the credulous would flock to him, as they do to all new teachers, no matter what they teach. The bulk of human beings are still too hungry, too devastated psychically, too bewildered and distressed, and too unsure of their future, their freedom, and their security to be in any condition to listen to him. And this seems to be very true. I used to say, and I don't say this anymore, but I used to say, if he was here right now, he would get stoned. He would be stoned immediately. Because, we have vulgar reactions or profane reactions to truth. And many of us don't want to hear it because we're so immersed in our own nonsense. He will not come, we may be sure, as a conquering hero, as the interpretations of the theological teachers have led man to believe, for that would certainly fail to identify him, and he would be simply classed as another military figure. Of them we have had a plethora. He will not come as the Messiah of the Jews to save the so-called Holy Land and the city of Jerusalem for the Jews, because he belongs to the whole world, and no Jews nor any other people have special rights or unique privileges or may claim him as their own. He will not come to convert the heathen world, for in the eyes of the Christ and of his true disciples, no such world exists, and the so-called heathen have demonstrated historically less of the evil of vicious conflict than has the militant Christian world. The history of the Christian nations and of the Christian church has been one of an aggressive militancy the last thing desired by Christ when he sought to establish the church on earth. So this is something we need to take heed of here. The heathen world does not exist in the eyes of Christ in the hierarchy, and have not done as much damage as has the militant Christian world, who over the centuries has, really laid it to humanity, right? I mean, really, very deeply, right? When he came before, he said, and the words have been sadly misread, "I come not to bring peace, but a sword." This will be true, especially during the early days of his advent. The sword which he wields is the sword of the Spirit. It is that sword which produces cleavage between true spirituality and then habitual materialism. The major effect of his appearance will surely be to demonstrate in every land the effects of a spirit of inclusiveness, an inclusiveness which will be channeled or expressed through him. All who seek right human relations will be gathered automatically to him, whether they are in one of the great world religions or not. All who seek no true or basic difference between religion and religion, or between man and man, or nation and nation, will rally around him. Those who embody the spirit of exclusiveness and separativeness will stand automatically and equally revealed, will stand automatically and equally revealed, and all men will know them for what they are. The cleaving sword, the Spirit, will, without wounding, bring revelation and indicate the first needed steps towards human regeneration. And they will stand revealed, and it's very easy to see at some point. It becomes very easy to see who's exclusive, what groups are separative. All of this becomes very clear to us. It's like we can see straight through it all. And it, in a sense, it is painful when we know it's not necessary, and we know the higher expression is of unity and non-separativeness. It does not make sense to the evolved in any way. And we see the need for change because it's so simply what is. It makes the things going on around us just look pathetic. And the people who really think that there's something in this life, in this world, they don't know how they're viewed from above. And it's really, you almost have to have compassion on them, because it's so ridiculous in a way. And it's human stupidity and ignorance, but it is kind of painful to watch when you know that the higher expression is these people are capable of so much love and so much more, but it's just not being expressed. And those things tend to make its way right into the tiniest little aspects of our life too. I mean, it's not just the bigger things, it's in everything. In any desire that an individual has, all these desires begin to look nonsensical at some point. And the way people talk is and act is, we have to have compassion, because we know at some point they're going to have to deal on this in their soul. And readjustments will have to be made, and we know that they're going to be painful. Standing as the focal point of the inner triangle of the Buddha, of the spirit of peace, and of the avatar of synthesis, the consequent outpouring potency of the Christ will be so great that the distinction between love and hate, between aggression and freedom, and between greed and sharing will be made lucidly clear to the eyes and minds of all men, and therefore the distinction between good and evil will be made equally clear. The invocative prayer from the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men, will meet with fulfillment. Thank God. And imagine a day when the scales are tipped and the majority of men can see through those, the other people's selfishness and ignorance, and can point it out to them, and they're backed by the majority, and it's put forth in a loving way. And imagine the readjustments that will take place then. It will certainly be an amazing time to be living on earth and watching these things. Christ will let loose into the world of men the potency and the distinctive energy of intuitive love. The results of the distribution of this energy of love will be twofold. Countless men and women in every land will form themselves into groups for the promotion of goodwill and for the production of right human relations. And imagine that being done without exclusivity or separateness, and those people believing that they are somehow better than others. They're just going to be doing it. And anyone who wants to join will be, embraced. So great will be their numbers that from beginning a small and relatively unimportant minority, they will be the largest and the most influential force in the world, right? So now the scales have, will have tipped in favor of light. Through them, the new group of world servers will be able to work successfully. And the work of the new group of world servers is explained in the other books. You've got Treatise on White Magic, and also the Rays and Initiations, and there's Discipleship in the New Age. There's many books. It's noted in the work of the new group of world servers is made clear, and they're working towards the same ends. And early on, unknowingly even. This active energy of loving understanding will mobilize a tremendous reaction against the potency of hate. To hate, to be separate, and to be exclusive will come to be regarded as the only sin, for it will be recognized that all the sins as listed and now regarded as wrong only stem from hate and from its product, the antisocial consciousness. Hate and its dependent consequences are the true sin against the Holy Ghost, about which commentators have so long debated, overlooking in their silliness the simplicity and the appropriateness of the true definition. So definitely worthy of another look there. This active energy of loving understanding will mobilize a tremendous reaction against the potency of hate. To hate, to be separate, and to be exclusive will come to be regarded as the only sin, for it will be recognized that all the sins as listed and now regarded as wrong only stem from hate or from its product, the antisocial consciousness. And I want to say that there are many people out there who are not a product of antisocial consciousness, but they have to keep to themselves because many of those, the majority of those that they encounter have the antisocial consciousness. So even those who are ready to bring unity are being met with this hate and separativeness and exclusiveness. The power of the hierarchical spiritual impact focused through Christ and his working disciples will be so great that the usefulness, the practicality, and the naturalness of right human relations will become so evident that world affairs will rapidly be adjusted and the new era of goodwill and of peace on earth will be inaugurated. The new culture and the new civilization will then be possible. I don't feel like this is a super far stretch, although we're not there. You know, the new birth after the first initiation should do a lot to remedy this, although, you know, it will immediately bring a new set of tests and trials. There will be many more who have progressed on past those to help dampen the blows and get them through it and guide them in a faster or quicker or more expedient way through the truth, to the truth, as opposed to somebody just waking up out in the middle of nowhere and then having to deal on all sorts of the vortex of energy just coming in, and that is not quite understood. It will be understood at this point, and there will be those who can help them through this because there will be so many at different stages. All the world religions have posited the fact that God is love, essentially, and that God is life, essentially, as well as intelligence. That life carries within itself the essential quality of the will of God, as well as the love of God. Both are equally important because that will is qualified by love. Hitherto, men have known nothing of the factual nature of the quality of livingness energized by love and will, except through a vague theoretical conception. The reappearance of the Christ will establish the fact of this divine livingness, the work which he will accomplish, which the aid of his disciples will demonstrate the love and the divine purpose which lie behind all phenomenal experience. And the key word there being phenomenal experience and coming to understand what that is. And it's not fast and it's not simple. It does require Christ, but I guess we could say. The establishing of right human relations is an aspect of the divine will for humanity and the next facet of the divine expression to manifest itself in human affairs. Individual, communal, national, and international. Nothing has ever finally impeded this divine expression except the time factor. And that time factor is determined by humanity and is an expression of divine free will. The intended divine expression can move rapidly or slowly into manifestation according as man decides. Now, this is a gigantic statement being made here. And usually when Master DK puts something like this out, he says, in this, I have given you a big clue and presented a significant truth. And that's not something that I've seen said much in this book, but I would say in that is he's given us much. And that time factor, so this time factor, we can speed it up. And it will have to do with aspiration directed in the right place by more and more, right, as it picks up speed. Hitherto, man has decided upon a very slow manifestation. It is here that the freedom of the human will shows itself, because divinity is imminent or present in all forms, and therefore in all human beings, that will must eventually be fulfilled. Because of the tremendously material intention, esoterically speaking, of all forms at present, that will has hitherto been retarded in its expression. It has not been the will of man to establish right human relations. hence the discipline of war, the torture, the forms, and the misery of human living today. Also, we've got many poor people promoting the capitalism, which is really intense. I'm going to take a quick break there. These factors are bringing about a great and general transformation. The indications of this are easily to be seen by spiritually minded people. Such people are constantly saying, as Christ did in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Let the will of God be done." They say it ignorantly and often hopelessly. Nevertheless, it indicates a general process of spiritual reorientation, of submission, and of acquiescence. Christ demonstrated this submission when he said, "I came not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me," from John 6. He proved his acquiescence when he cried, "Father, not my will, but thine be done." Submission has in it the elements of conquest by circumstances and of a recognition which may not understand, but which submits to that which is imposed. Acquiescence has in it the element of an understanding intelligence, and this marks a great step forward. Both admit the fact of a divine overshadowing will in the life of mankind today. Both are preparatory to a recognition of Christ's work in bringing about right human relations. At present, the submission of mankind to the divine will is a negative submission. The true submission is a positive attitude of spiritual expectancy, leading eventually to a positive acquiescence. A spiritual expectancy is also to be seen. It is part of the work of the new group of world servers to intensify this. They have also to foster spiritual submission and intelligent acquiescence in the masses, who normally divide themselves into the two classes, expressing these two attitudes. These factors of submission, acquiescence, and expectancy are latent in every man. It is these three divine potentialities which will enable men to respond to the message of the Christ, and therefore the selfless sacrifice, the understanding compromise, and the comprehension of the many and diverse points of view necessary to the establishing of right human relations will be far easier to bring about. The comprehension of the many and diverse points of view will be far easier to bring about. We would all find it helpful to reflect upon what are the factors reorganized in submission and acquiescence. In establishing right human relations, relinquishment, renunciation, submission to existent facts, and obedient acquiescence to divine law are all involved. These are the things which Christ earlier demonstrated on earth, and they are the things which we will help humanity to accept with enthusiasm and understanding. This will produces happiness. Happiness is a difficult lesson to learn. It is for mankind a totally new experience, and Christ will have to teach men how to handle happiness correctly, to overcome the ancient habits of misery, and thus to know the meaning of true joy. Christ, however, is not coming simply to teach men the need for right human relations. He is coming to teach them how to establish it successfully themselves. That's the end of that section there on the teachings that it will be brought, and or the first section of the teaching to be brought. The second section is Christ will teach the law of rebirth. And I think we stop this here for the day, and we pick up there tomorrow, as there is a lot there to contemplate. And I may just continue on with this here in a little while, but this is nevertheless a good stopping point. So, all right, lots to think about. We'll see you again soon.